Welcome back, and I was speaking a moment ago that we're going to do the garbage piles up tonight, which is basically some of the studies and thoughts of the Bhagwan. And I think really we can all get a lot of good out of something like this, because indeed in our lives basically that's what happens. The garbage piles up, and it's a funny thing if you think about it. The ultimate explosion into new life is death. And the entire life of an individual is spent trying to avoid that. And nobody ever does. Nobody ever succeeds. It's like the second coming of Jehoshua the Christ, as Jesus is, everybody who's been waiting for it has died. And so then we try to build security, and it seems as though there is no possible way. There is no possible way on the face of the earth to build a security, because of the fact that the end is so programmed. But the garbage piles up is a dissertation about the functioning of the mind. There was a Catholic saint of some years ago, I guess back in the Middle Ages of time. Her name was Teresa of Avila. And she said and made this statement: all that you need to do is look. Is to look. That's what she said. That was her solution basically to life. All that you need to do is to look. Jehoshua the Christ made a statement very similar to that, and he amplified it a little bit and said this is what's required. Okay? And he said in page 781 in Matthew chapter 6 verse 22 that you must look for sure, but you must look via that which is the single eye. The light of the body is the eye. If your eye is single, your body will fill with light. So Teresa of Avila said truthfully that what you must do is look, and Jehoshua the Christ said, yes, you must look, but you must look with the single eye. Okay. And to look with the single eye is to look within. And that's basically what's being said. So we're trying to see, if you have the capacity to look, then you can find God. And that's what Bhagwan said. If you have the capacity to look, you'll find God. If you have the capacity to hear, you'll find His music. If you have the capacity to touch, every texture becomes that which is God's texture. There's a good sight to see. Yes. If you touch the rock, according to the Bhagwan, you'll find God. So we have to look. We have to look via the single eye. We have to touch. I'll tell you something right now, and I think the more that we've been doing these in the beginning series we do in the mornings, there's no other way. I can tell you right now, if your life is a mess, if your life is a mess, if the garbage has piled up, it's because you haven't thrown it out. You've let it pile up. I mean, nobody else has been inside of your house, which is your mind, but you. The garbage is in there, and it's stinking, and it's rancid because you've let it pile up. And now we get to a point where we're starting to look at some advice and some understanding from people. We're looking at the Bible, for instance, in these morning sessions in an entirely different way. We're not looking the way we used to look. We don't look at the Bible as a religious document anymore. We look at it as a cosmic psychological direction. What do you have to do? And that's what we're talking about. Who takes out the garbage in your house? Well, you may identify who takes out the physical garbage, but the important thing is that inside of each one of our heads is garbage which is piled up, and piled up. And garbage inside of your head does the same thing as garbage inside of your house. It causes problems. It causes disease. And it causes all kinds of difficulty. And the hardest thing to get people to do is to start throwing the garbage out. Very difficult thing to do. Because we are institutionalized by the system that our salvation, if you would, comes in communicating with other people, going to other places, taking part in seminars and all of these different types of things, and not understanding that what we have to really do is start paying attention to ourselves. And really start very, very swiftly to look inside of ourselves and get to know ourselves. Because what we have done is we've paid attention to church, we've paid attention to systems, we've paid attention to our employer, we've paid attention to our family, and all of these things we've paid attention to have led us to ignore the fact of who we are, and so that when we find up as we start to get a little bit older, we start to get sick, that we're a stranger to ourselves. We know everything about religion, we know everything about government, we know everything about our job, but we know nothing about ourselves. And then we've never looked inside of ourselves, and it's just like if you look in your garage or wherever you keep your garbage in the basement or wherever, if you don't look, you don't realize it's piling up. And when we talk about touching that spot, okay, that's an important thing. There is no way you're going to get out of this life. There is no way you're going to find any benefits out of this life. There is no way you're going to find anything that is security or prosper or anything else. There's no way you're going to turn your life around from being the mess that it is unless you touch that spot. You have to do that. One of the things we showed this morning, before Sarah could be ready to give birth to the child of promise, what had to be done? Abraham had to do certain things. If he didn't do it, forget about it. You have a woman within inside of here in the consciousness, which is the spirit. That woman is barren. And unless you do certain things in the same way that Abraham had to do them, which talked about understanding the left and the right side, unless you do those things, the woman will stay barren. Once you decide to do these things, the woman will no longer be barren, and the woman will give birth, and that will be the child within you who will be the child of promise. And then you will have the balance, because you'll have the child Ishmael, you'll have the child Isaac. And they will have to coexist, although they won't live with one another. But they'll have to coexist. But right now, we don't have any child of promise. All we have is the beaten Ishmael, who's never been sent out to the desert, and it's hell inside. It's exactly what went on between Hagar and, give me your name, Sarah. It's exactly what went on. Fighting, conflict, and all of that type of business, which is described beautifully in the Bible. But here's the mistake. You touch. And what are you going to touch? You're going to touch the pineal gland of the brain. You're going to touch that, which is the divine aspect of the mind. You're going to touch that through your meditation. But here's where the mistake comes. And this is something that you really should listen to very carefully, because it is a terrible mistake, and it is what causes us not to see any results in our lives and in the lives of others around us when we make this touch. It happens in the Bible. Moses is told, touch the rock, and the water will flow. I mean, come on. You know, this is more hocus pocus, Blackstone the magician or what. What is this all about? There's a reason for all of this, because the rock is talking about that which is the pineal gland, the pineal stone, and the idea is if you touch that, the water will flow, the truth will flow within your consciousness. Moses makes a fatal mistake, and it's accounted here on page 136 of the Bible. And for the rest of you, if you look in the book of Numbers, in Numbers chapter 20, you know, just a little bit of housekeeping here. Al, I heard that thing go off a few minutes ago, and I didn't see anybody come. Okay. That's fine. Look what happens when Moses is told to touch the rock and the water will flow. Look what happens. It says in Numbers chapter 20, verse 11, what does it say? Moses lifted his hand, and with his rod he hit the rock twice. There's the problem. You can call it religion, you can call it New Age, you can call it whatever you want to call it. Once you have added anything of your own, it's done. Oh, sure, you'll get some kind of a return. But what's the problem with Moses? He never could see the promised land. Why? Because he kept entering his own consciousness, his own mind, his own ideas, and he didn't make it. So if you're going to touch, you touch. But don't bring anything. Don't bring any of your gimmicks. Don't bring any of your ideas. Don't bring the way somebody told you how to meditate. Don't bring the way somebody told you how to say this or how to say that or how to look at this or how to focus on that. That's not what you're told to do. You're told to touch. And all you have to do in order to touch is direct the energy within you. Just Direct the energy within you. I have come here for the mind of God. Sit there still, close your eyes, and let the thing happen. Don't add anything at yourself. And if you look at your life, and if your life is exactly the way you want it, then that's fine. Turn the TV off and let's go on to something else and we won't worry about it. But if there should be changes, in your life, in the life of your family, in the life of your children, in the way things are happening about you, look at the problem. You looked at the movies, you've looked at the television, you've looked at the preachers, you've looked at the books, but you've never looked at yourself. And that's the problem. And so because you've never looked at yourself, there's a heaviness, there's a darkness. And the one thing that you don't really have time for is looking at yourself. And the reason you have no time for looking at yourself is because you're trained. You're trained that everything comes by looking at others. Go to the church if you want to be saved. Go to the government if you want to have security. Go to the job if you want to make money. Go to your parents if you want this. Go to your uncle if you want this. Go to your husband. Go to your wife. Go to your kids. Go everywhere. But by all means, stay away from yourself. And then in that is what causes the heaviness and the darkness in your heart and all the problems that crop up in your life. You're a stranger to yourself. You don't know yourself. You know everybody around you. You know the names of all your nephews and nieces and uncles and aunts, but you don't know the name of yourself. So you become a stranger to yourself. So you've got to follow what Teresa of Avila said. You've got to look. What is inside of you? What do you have to express? What do you have to let out? Carl Jung, for those of you come here, you know Carl Jung. We've done a lot of lectures on his work. His name is spelled J-U-N-G. He was actually lived in Switzerland. Psychoanalyst and a mystic of the wildest sorts. He was the kind of guy that lived in his house, and he was such a mystic and would go so deep into the meditation and the metaphysical aspects of life that the doorbell would ring and there'd be nobody there and all kinds of stuff. And they say at one point, Carl Jung got up and just screamed out in his house, "What the hell is going on here?" And then they come and say, "Dr. Jung, why are you acting? Why you do this?" And Dr. Jung said, "If I don't understand, then how can I help people who experience this? I've got to experience what they're experiencing." And it's very good. It's very good. I always had a degree of affection for Timothy Leary with the drugs that he took, the LSD and all of that business, because he experienced what people were experiencing. The problem I had with him was that he was encouraging people. He seemed to be encouraging other people to do it. Under controlled circumstances, Dr. Jung or Dr. Leary can do those things and self-analyze. That's fine. But Jung was a tremendous mystic. But Jung also was a tremendous psychoanalyst, and he found the location of God in the human consciousness. He said it's a super consciousness within the human mind, which is what we refer to as God. Who knows that? Wait, what is he going to do for you? He's dead. He lives in Switzerland. What's he going to do? But the point is, you have to know that. You have to know the place within you, which is God. Carl Jung found it. Carl Jung said it is there. That Carl Jung was not a New Age teacher. He was not a fundamentalist teacher. He was not a Buddhist. He was a psychoanalyst. He says, I found the place in the human mind where God is located. The man is the kind of a man with the credentials that when he speaks about things like that, you should listen, because he knew what he was talking about. Carl Jung used to tell his patients to paint. And he said, paint pictures. Because he said that people, as they started to paint, could start to express themselves, and that if you can paint your nightmares, he said, you can become free of them. Because what Carl Jung said is that expression brings freedom and healing. Express yourself. Express yourself. That's a good thing to write down. If it was some preacher that said it, or if it was I that said it, it's his idea. But this is the only one that we have that's kind of knowledgeable and follows a pathway that is metaphysical or mystical or spiritual and combines spiritualism with psychoanalyst Carl Jung. And he said, you've got to express yourself. He said, expression brings freedom and healing. Repression brings bondage, guilt, fear, and anger. And that's why religion is so bad. Because everything has to be repressed. You can't even discuss the things. People have sexual problems. People have problems with their life. They run off and do this. They run off and do that. And you get into a situation, you go into a church, and you go to the Wednesday night social or the Wednesday night prayer meeting. You can't talk about these crazy things that you experience. You're not allowed to. Because they all pretend that they don't have them. Everybody is in that room with repressed feelings. And nobody's allowed to discuss them. So they all go home thinking that the other person has got it all figured out and all worked out, and everybody's whacked out. And everybody, when they get home, they open the door, they go into their house, they realize that they're all whacked out. But they're down there making believe. And what is it when you make believe that you're spiritual, but you're actually demonstrating nothing but emotional instability? Remember when Abraham, what did he try to do? He tried to pass his wife off as his sister. Remember? Well, wife means the emotions, sister means the spirit. He's trying to pass his emotions off as spirit. That's a very deep and wonderful description in the Bible that was described 4,000 years ago. Because it goes on today. You're jumping up and down, you see them on television, hallelujah, and they're jumping all up and down. They're emoting, they're emotional. Totally carnal mind is in control. And they're trying to say, I feel the Spirit in this place. They don't feel the Spirit in the place. You can't feel the Spirit like that. Because the only way you can feel the Spirit is when there's nothing there. And then when there's nothing there, you can't feel it. You have to determine if the Spirit was there by your life. What has changed? Has the way you think changed? Has the way you act changed? Has your family life changed? Has what goes on inside of your house changed? If that's the case, then you're moving in the realm of that which is Spirit. That's the only way you can tell. You cannot tell by jumping up and down. You cannot tell because you yell or run around and jump over a chair, because that's emoting. And when you do that, you're passing your wife off as your sister. And you're trying to convince people that's, but you repress, and Carl Jung says when you can't discuss those things, you can pray, you'll hold them deep inside of you, but sooner or later, boom, you'll explode. You just see what happens out in California. What goes on when somebody explodes? What goes on when somebody goes into a rage? And anyone is capable of exploding. Anyone is capable of going into a rage. Anyone is capable of doing terrible violence to anybody else. All that has to happen, the conditions have to be right, the mechanism is right, the switch is tripped. You can think, if you came upon somebody, or if you found somebody that you love, maybe a child, maybe you'd be a spouse, maybe you'd be a mother, and you came upon a person who did them terrible violence or killed one of them, you could instantly go into a rage and kill somebody. Because that's the nature of the beast. But so what are you told in religion? You say, don't think about this. Deny that the experience happened. Don't discuss it. And so what do? You have this thing here in your mind causing you all of this problem, and it's up here in your mind. Got a sourpuss on. Oh, looks like Fu Manchu. And so what happens? Oh, don't talk about that. You know what they used to say when I was in the fundamentalist, and I'm sure some of you that were in the fundamentalist were saying, whenever you tried to talk about one of your problems, they say, don't confess that. That's a bad confession. That's a negative confession, and it'll come to pass. But they didn't realize it already came to pass. It was the garbage inside of your head. And so what happens? Don't confess it. Just let's sing, let's get up and sing, let's hold hands, and we'll ask Jesus to come into the room, and he'll take care of everything. So you all hold hands, you ask Jesus to come into the room, I'll walk in the valley alone, and all this stuff, and you start singing the songs, and everybody jumps up and down. But this hasn't gone away. In fact, what has happened here is this now has started to move all over the place, grinding itself deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper inside of you, because you've neglected it. You're not allowed to talk about it. So the repression dives deeper and deeper and deeper into the subconscious. And then, that's the point where Carl Jung says, once it lodges in the subconscious, now it only needs a mechanism, and it'll explode. So you think the thoughts are gone, you think all of those things that have been scaring you are gone, but all they've done is they've sunk deeper back into your consciousness. So all kinds of problems can arise, because now you know what's happened. That which you tried to talk to people about, you forgot. But it didn't go away. It's still there. And all it needs is the right thing, and bang, it'll come back and trigger and explode on you. Doesn't make any difference who it is. And that's what'll happen. And you'll never be allowed to discuss this because you hang out with people that don't believe in this kind of stuff. So they say, oh, you can't talk about that. You can't think about that. You got to take your mind off of that. I remember I had a friend of mine whose 21-year-old son was killed in an automobile accident. Can you imagine? And it happened right on the same street where they live. He hit a tree coming home and was killed about 200 yards from the house. And she was devastated. And you know what people told her at the church? Go bowling. Get it out of your mind. Think of something else. Totally, absolutely, completely unreal. Couldn't deal with it. And then she started to having experiences with this boy, with his astral body. He would come in through the windows and he would talk to her. Oh, you should see a doctor. You should see a psychiatrist. They don't understand this stuff. They do not understand. What do you have to do? If you counsel with somebody, you have to counsel with somebody who gives you the opportunity to take out your garbage. In other words, that lets you pull the garbage out, dump. Somebody that will sit down and not talk to you, but lets you throw the garbage out the window. Somebody that will allow you to express yourself, to unload all of the garbage and dump. And the deeper that you dig by expressing yourself, Jung says you'll find some old, rancid garbage deep in the cellar of your mind. Then throw it out. What's there? You'll find it. You'll find it. And it's all the stuff that was placed from wherever. And that's what is the beauty of this. Because once you understand where it came from, once you understand how it ferments in the cellar of your mind, then Jehoshua the Christ said in John 8:32, then you'll know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And the truth is that all that you have tried to repress by developing new habits has not driven the problem out. Don't go there anymore. Don't think of that. Take up bowling. Play a little, throw darts or whatever. So you're throwing darts and you're thinking of this. You're bowling and you're thinking of this. You're going to the Wednesday night Bible study and you're thinking of this. You're going to the prayer meeting and you're thinking of this. You're going to church and it never leaves your head. You're thinking of this, but now you don't dare tell anybody because they've already said, shut up, they don't want to hear about it. So now you're all alone with this, and it ferments and it ferments and it ferments until it explodes. And it happens all the time. We were talking about the O.J. Simpson and whoever did that or whatever, but it goes on every day, 1,000 times a day. People get knifed or their throat cut or somebody blows their head all the time, all over the place. They explode. Why is it? And I think the Bible, as we understand it and we take it and understand it spiritually, gives a pretty good description of what goes on. So you come to church and you know better. Oh, you joined this or you did this, and you know that you should be doing something else than what you're doing. Doesn't make any difference. You know that you should be doing something else. But you're too you're too bored with life. You're bored with being here. You just want to go on and, it's like a big bear somewhere that wants to sit in it's like the bear up at the Bronx Zoo. The bear is nuts. They get psychiatrist, $25,000 psychiatrist, because the polar bear is nuts. And why is the polar bear nuts? Because it's bored. It's frustrated. Because it's not living the life that it was made to live. See? That's what we've done. We've created a polar bear who's a psychotic. Because we want to enjoy the bear. We don't care what the bear enjoys. And you know who you do that to too? Children. We want them to be the way we want them to be. Doesn't make any difference. Doesn't make any difference. What they want to be is irrelevant. We want them to be what we want them to be. So we create not only psychotic polar bears, we create psychotic kids, and the psychotic kids become us. Jimmy Buffett has a great song. That is one of the premier songs probably of all time. He says, "We are the people our parents warned us about." And it's true. Because we've created this mess. Look at Romans chapter 7 on page 924. Romans chapter 7 on page 924. The Apostle Paul, what does he say? Verse 22, I delight in the law of God after the inward man. Very important. That's the only place where you can survive. But look what he says. Verse 23, but I see another law in my members, that's a physical body, warring against the law of my mind bringing me into captivity of the law of sin, which is in my physical body, which is in the carnal mind. Look at Romans chapter 8, verse 7, this same page. Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, it is not subject to the law of God, neither can it be. So there's a problem then. And there's something going on inside of each one of us. And the reason it's going on inside of each one of us is it was put there. It was put there by people, and more often than not, it's put there by your parents. Some of you, it's put there by your wife. Some of there, it's put there by your husband. Some of there, it's even put there by your children. Some of you, it's put there by the church. But whatever it is, somebody has laid things inside of your mind. They now become ugly truths. Even though they're lies, they become truths to you because that's your tradition. And that's what we used to do. And that's what we continue to do. But I'll tell you something, and this is Carl Jung, and this is what he says. He says, don't let anyone tell you different. After you have thrown out the garbage which has accumulated, you will begin accumulating more. It is an endless process. So if you want, you know, the important thing here is what we started with. Do you want your life to be happier? Do you want your life to be better? If you do, you have got to make up your mind. Will you spare the time? Will you take the time to make meditation the premier requisite of your life? If not, forget about it. Because all that's going to happen, if not, is you're going to go to bed, you're going to get up, you're going to go to work, you're going to come home, you're going to fight once in a while, you're going to have sex once in a while, you're going to go to the bathroom, you're going to go to bed, you're going to get up, you're going to come home, you're going to have fight, you're going to have sex, you're going to get up, you're going to watch TV, you're going to go to bed. And then one day, you're not going to get up. Thank God, she said. One day you're not going to get up, and it's over. But the problem with it is you've accomplished absolutely nothing. The problem of it is you've spent your entire life, and it's a complete, absolute waste. Whether you've lived 50 years or 60 years or 70 years, it's a waste. And that's the problem. And you know, the point is, it really shouldn't be that way. And it doesn't have to be that way. How far have you come? How old are you now? And then you look back and say, well, you know, has this been worthwhile? Have I done anything? Do I know it? Maybe you're starting to know a little bit. But for the most part, your life has been an absolute disaster. A waste of time. So what do? You take things that you say, well, you take things that you say, or church or religion says are bad for you, and you've got to abandon this because it's your tradition. Well, I'll give up this. We have religions that have people giving up candy bars once a year so that God is happy. I used to do that. I won't have any chocolate in front of anybody. I'll give up you know, doing this, but you really would. And this is how we reduced our lunacy down to this point. We're going to give up eating chocolate, or we're going to give up ice cream, and then God will be happy. And we honestly believe that. Well, let me tell you something. Take it serious for a minute. What happened? Galileo had to apologize to the Pope for saying that the earth goes around the sun. He had to apologize. Galileo. What did he have to say? Oh, I'm sorry. You're right, Mr. Pope. I will put my hand on the Bible. I apologize. So Galileo gave it up. But I want you to see something. Even though Galileo said he was sorry, guess what? The earth didn't listen. It continued flying around the sun anyway. That's the important part. Galileo said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. But the earth did not listen. The earth continued to fly around the sun. What happened? The church made Galileo repress the truth. The church became very happy. The church is happy. Galileo is not saying this anymore. The earth was still flying around the sun, but they made up a new truth. I'm not telling you something that isn't real. This went on for 400 years. The church was happy. And they sang, hallelujah. And they sang, praise God. And they were very, very happy. Yeah. Come on.
What do you think is like the reason behind this giving up something for Lent? You know, like what are they trying to deduce the person?
What they're trying to do is some way buy themselves out of the guilt feelings that they have repressed and stored up within each one of them. They all feel that they're guilty in some way of offending this thing called God, and so that the best way that they can somehow make it up is to pay like you would a ransom, or pay off something. You know, like lighting a candle and you pay money for it. Well, this way you'll give up something and God won't go so rough on you, because after all, yes, I might have murdered that woman, but after all, I gave up Snickers bars for 2 weeks.
Yeah, but what do you think that the church was trying to do to the end of it? I mean, there's got to be some type of a motive there, you know, from the other end. Are they trying to give you like a futile effort that you can never do it, so then you always stay in bondage to them? Because like, how many people really fulfilled their Lenten, you know?
I think it was disappointing.
You'll have to come up if you want. I can't. You can't talk. You think it's a.
They were trying to get people to discipline.
You have to come up. You know, but there's people that are listening here. Yeah.
Where's the focus on this?
Up at front, you got to turn the. You got to turn that. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I think originally what the church tried to do is use that as a form of discipline, self-discipline. In other words, repress. You're not only repressing emotions and behaviors that they deemed not acceptable, and you do that in little lessons, like even when we were kids, we went offer it up for the poor souls. You know, we didn't eat meat on Friday. It was a form of self-mortification, discipline. And that extended to the emotions and the feelings, and I mean, this is good to do this. This is good not to acknowledge certain behaviors or certain feelings or certain emotions, and they did it materially, you know, in the physical through these little self-mortifications.
What do you think?
I don't know. Yeah, I accept what Rose said. It's just that I don't know. They're just like inside me, there's something bigger ringing here from the church, like, you know, like you know, what you're saying is true, but I just feel like there's, I don't know, that there's a control or something coming from a church, and almost like you can't do it, so you always stay in bondage to them.
Well, but you know, what you have to do in order to come to grips with these types of things is do something that we haven't been allowed to do. We have to grow up as adults and sit down and say, now let me think. Is it possible that there is some entity on some planet somewhere that will really be appeased if I don't eat ice cream this week? I mean, really rationally, okay? But you see, in this way, somehow by giving up this candy bar, I'm going to accompany Christ in his suffering, you know, or something like this. And unfortunately, what I think this tends to do, it goes beyond this. It goes to a lot of places where people in some of these other countries will crawl on their knees across rocks, or get up on crosses and have themselves tied to cross. All of this bizarre stuff. And it takes away the exact thing that Joshua talked about, that, you know, I've come that you may have life. Instead of that, basically these rules and regulations say, I've come that you may have guilt. You want to come up here?
Yeah.
Come.
One of the reasons Martin Luther King broke off from the church was because of this same thing. It's because of the penance. And of course, the people with money could light more candles and build higher things, and they gave money to the church. I think it was a matter of economics for the church. Mm-hmm. So if you gave up your candy bar or your ice cream, that meant that money that you didn't spend for the ice cream and the candy bar went to the church.
Okay, that's a good point.
And,
very good.
Yeah.
That's very good. I think he just struck a nerve. I think Al just solved the problem for him. You know, it always comes down to a buck. Okay, but okay. All right, but this is the point. Let's just think of what happened here with Galileo. He wasn't giving up something for Lent, but he was giving up something much deeper than that. He was giving up the truth. So let's just say that. Let's say Galileo gave that up, and the church was very happy, even though they forced him, at the point of a knife, to give it up. But it was then, see, that we have to come. Look at this. This is Galileo. He gave up the truth. The church became happy. But now, watch what happens here. And this is why I bring this up. It's very important that you look at this scripture with me. And let me show you something. Go to page 488 and look at Psalm chapter 51. Okay? And here's the important part of this little lesson that we're doing. In Psalm 51, look at verse 6. Behold, you desire truth in the inward part, and in the hidden part you shall make me to know wisdom. In the inward part. Okay? Now listen to me very carefully as we come back to this thing. The church repressed the truth. So they walked in their own stupidity. Because, as we know, the church won, but the earth continued to go around the sun just as Galileo said it. Galileo knew the truth. So it remained truth where? In his inward part. Because they could make him sign a paper. They could make him say, oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. But inside of himself, in his inward part, he knew the truth. He had wisdom. But in the inward part of the church, there was a lie. Do you see? In the inward part of the church, there was a lie, and it was a lie that they had to live to control the minds of those who lived in dark religious superstition. It is very, very important that religious organizations keep people in bondage to dark superstitions. And so they had in their inward part a lie. Galileo had in his inward part the truth, and the Bible says, you have made me to know truth. You desire truth in the inward part. In the hidden part, you shall make me to know wisdom. That's where Galileo had that truth. And it took 400 years for this church, which claimed to have the truth, to finally admit that in their inward part, they had a lie, and they apologized to the man Galileo. Now, that's very, very important. So it doesn't make it. Now you have to understand, this is one man. Here you have the church, there are millions. And learn a lesson by this. Because millions say that this is the way it is, doesn't make it the truth. Because one man said, no, that's not the way it is, he was right. And that's what happens today. Millions follow a church, a religion, and they say, this is the way. And a handful like yourself say, no, it's not the way. And it's not. And that's what we learned about something. This is a beautiful lesson to learn. The entire corporate power structure of the organization, that which was millions of people all over the world said, yes, this is right. One man stood and said, no, it's not. And he had the truth. So just because a lie is believed by millions does not make it the truth. And it's a very important thing. Very, very important thing. So basically then, you are what you think. What do you think? And this is the problem. You want to look at your problem? You want to look at your problem around the earth and around the world? Do you know why? Do you know why you feel rotten? Do you know why you get those nightmares? Do you know why you feel the way you do inside yourself? Because of the fact that people who believe in devils and demons and hell live in fear and actually experience those things. And then they take those things out on other people. And the devils and the demons and hells that they believe in actually manifest within themselves, and they act like that. And it's all over the world, and it comes in the same place that the degrading of women came. It comes from the same place that the violence against women came. It comes from church. It comes from religion. And remember what Jehoshua the Christ said, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. He knew the truth. They had him in prison, but he was free. They lived a lie. They were free, but they were in prison. And that's the way it is today. You can't invent truth. You've got to discover it. Remember we were talking about the scientists. We were talking about what does the scientist do? The scientist does an experiment. But he's not looking for something to come out the way he wants it to come out. He's looking for the truth. Whatever way it goes. If he's a person of science, whatever way it comes out, whatever it is, that's the truth. But see, there are barriers that have prevented us from having the truth, and the barriers are the mountains of lies that have been poured on us by the system. And that's what Isaiah said, woe unto you that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness. Here's Galileo, here's the church. They put darkness for light, and light for darkness. It's exactly what's being said. You'll never know truth. Let me quote something from the Bhagwan. You will never know truth if you are a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu or a Buddhist. Your very membership in one of those organizations will keep you blind. When you identify yourself as one of those, you're saying, I'm a so-and-so, I was born that way, I'm raised that way, and I know the truth. But Bhagwan says, once you drop the ideas of the system that you're attached to, then you'll find truth within and without. How true that is. How true that is. But the society and the church, they all depend on lies. And this is what we were talking about you and about your life and about my life. And that is, I think we should, and that is the child. We've been talking a lot about the child within and about Ishmael and the things that we've learned, but the child. And you as a child. The child has no defense. No defense. Even Galileo could say, okay, I did it. The child doesn't know. The child is helpless. They have got to learn whatever you teach them because they depend on you. Without your teaching, they can't survive. And with whatever you teach them, it can be something that somebody else told you that's a lie. They have got to obey it because you said it, and they are totally dependent on you. They cannot do anything on their own. So whatever you say them, see, they can't survive without you. And so what do? They believe you. And you know what? That's the way all of us went through church. We couldn't survive without the church. So we believed them. Why? Because they were right? No, because we had to survive. We had to go to heaven. So we believed them and we all went to hell. Right here. And so what has the child have to be? Here's the child. The child must be a Jew because you said so. The child must be a Christian because you said so. The child must be a Hindu because you said so. The child must be a Buddhist because you said so. The child must be a Muslim because you said so. All that you've got to do is understand that they must become what you want them to become. Whatever you say, that's what they must become. And do you know what? You're sitting in this room or you're watching on television, somebody wanted you to become what you are. And if it's not good, remember, somebody made you that way. Because you were a child and you were defenseless and you couldn't say a thing about it, and your mother and your father said, this is what you're going to do because, and you said, why must I do that? And they said, because I said so. And what could you do? What could any of us do? We're just little defenseless things. And what did you say? You screamed and you stomped your feet, but you did it. Because you were not going out until you did. You're not going to get anything until you eat this disaster that I have made. It tastes awful. I don't care. Eat it. I worked all day and I slaved all day. And so we've molded all of these monstrosities. And then you'll turn around and you'll see on the television and they'll have conferences and they'll say, what has happened to the kids? Why are they this way? They're this way because they're the way we were. Because we taught them how to be this way because that's the way we were. The only thing different between the kids now and the kids then is they didn't have all the television to spy and show everybody what they were doing. We didn't have that. In our era, everybody did it, but there was no television around to show everybody what you were doing. And don't think that you didn't do the same things, because I can show you the stuff in the Bible about hitting people in the head with rocks if they're not virgins and all of that stuff. It's pretty wild stuff. They didn't have any TV on. Could you imagine that? Television? If they had to give a pelvic examination to young ladies right now and hit them in the head with rocks, you know what? CNN would be there. Well, they're picking up the rocks now, and they're going to hit her in the head. It's God's word. So instead of making children more alive, more aware, we fill them with more what? Fear, more threat, more guilt. And we pile it up and pile it up and pile it up until finally the little kid is covered in what? Garbage. Can't see. You can't see. What am I going to do? So how do we destroy the little ones? Because we make them like us. I want you to grow up and be like your uncle. And you know what he was. Now, here's we conclude this. Let me show you the problem here. Jehoshua the Christ said. Jehoshua the Christ. And for those of you who may not know, we are pledging in this church to use his proper and correct name. For the first time, any church in the United States is using his right name. His name was not Jesus, it was Jehoshua. That should make you feel good. It makes me feel good. Okay, Jehoshua the Christ said something. You know what I think? Maybe they didn't use his real name because it's harder to spell. They weren't too smart, you know. Okay. This is what Jehoshua the Christ said. You're making a big mistake. You must become like them. It is not they who must become like you. Tough. Tough. But they have our guilt, they have our fear, they have our competitive spirit. We haven't become like them. And what does Jehoshua say in Matthew 18:3? Except you be converted and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom. And that is, I don't need your preconditioned ideas. I don't need your books. I don't need your traditions. I don't need your religion. I need you to come in sucking your thumb like a little child, sit down and wait for me. And I will come and I will take you by the hand and I will lead you. And it's very hard to do, and that's why when Nicodemus came out with his Bibles under his arm and his books here and all of this stuff and his hat on and his cross around his neck and says, "What must I do?" Jehoshua looked at him and said, "We better start over again. You're going to have to be born." And Jehoshua could do nothing with him. Jehoshua said, "Hey, nothing I can do. Dr. Kevorkian will see you now." And, yeah. Because it was all religion. What is there to do? I can't do nothing. Right. You're going to just put that on pause and record. Okay? There was nothing, there was absolutely nothing that could be done. And so here's the answer to that. The little child has learned nothing, knows nothing, is looking to be taught, okay? The little child. You will see and believe what you have been taught, and you will miss the magic. And the reason that you lived all of your life following the regulations and the traditions of your parents and their parents is because you were taught that, and you missed the magic. And then finally, at this part in your life, somehow, something stimulated you into saying, "Let me find out." And now you've come and you've stretched your hands out to everything that lives. To the trees, to the fish, to the birds, to the animals, to the children of the world. You're not a Buddhist, you're not a Muslim, you're not a Christian, you're not a Baptist, you're a human being, part of God's great universal nature. And then you realize this is the only way it can possibly be. And so on the 4th of July or whenever it is, you stand up and sing, "God bless the universe, land that I love." And that's the universe that is created by the great creator, the mother and father God, that you now have become part of them. And everyone is a brother, everyone is a sister, everyone is a mother, everyone is a father. All life is precious. There are no groups or organizations that are favored by this creative process more than another. And that, when you have children, you can sit with them and teach them the love and the beauty of all things that live. And that they are part of the whole. They are one with everybody. They are not a particular group. They are not a particular organization. They are part of God's kingdom and universe. And then there's no need to fight anymore, because there's no boundaries to protect anymore. There's no religions to defend anymore. And you are one with that which is the whole. You are one with that which is the universe. And that's the beautiful part of all of this. And that happens when you finally get deep inside of the attic of your life or out to the backyard of your life, and you take all of the garbage which has been placed inside of you and piled up, and you take it and you dump it. And when it's all cleaned, then you keep it under control and you start to live and start to understand. And the mother within you opens the womb and gives birth to the child of promise. And the child of promise is born, Isaac, which brings joy. And Isaac lives with Ishmael. Ishmael, the child who has been wounded but has now been found. And the two coexist. The spiritual child of promise, the physical child of life, coexisting. And a beautiful experience, a new age experience that scares the pants off religious people who must control. And who, as I showed you on this board, take that which is the truth and turn it into a lie, and then thank God for the wisdom and understanding. Okay? We'll see you. Bye-bye.